Hey guys, Nylak here. We're going to do a quick video on Shaman buff stacking. I realized yesterday after reading a Discord post I was doing it wrong. So I wanted to show which buff stacks and how to get the most benefit out of your Shaman buff. So let's dig right into it. All right, so first thing I want to just show is the actual buffs that stack and kind of the way that I set them up on my buff bars. I actually use two different buff sets, and I'm also going to show how we use buff sets in case you don't know that. But first, the way I set them up is I try to put like buffs kind of on the same bar. So we can see on this top row here, I start with my stat buffs. That way, if you're doing this as you're leveling, this guide is really focused on, level 50. But if you set it up as you're leveling, it's very easy to swap out things. So if you go, oh, I now have a new level of strength, you know exactly where to put it and see that you can then save your buff set with that thing. But with this method, all of your main stat buffs stack. So you've got your strength, your agility, your dexterity, your health. There's also charisma, which we're going to find on my second bar, and I'll talk about why when we get there. I then put Spirit of Belie on my fifth slot here. You do want to use this over Spirit of Wolf because it also has an attack buff component, so along with your run speed. Now there is a bug right now in the game where that does get overwritten a lot, which can be a pain, but they did say in the last developer chat, the roundtable, they are going to be fixing that. So I did include that in the guide. Then I have all of my resist. You don't have to use grist group magic. I think it might give a couple more points. I should test that. The reason I use it is that it does not cast resist magic on my pet because I did not get the AAA for spells, normal spells or group spells rather, to land on my pet, and then I don't have to spend the time to remove it. Uh, resist poison, talisman of Jasoneth, not sure how to pronounce that. This is your disease buff. This does give 4 or 5 more points than the non-group version, non-AE version, so I would use that one. Resist fire, resist cold. And then these are the big ones, right? So you have other uh, versions of these spells like harnessing, which will give health, strength, and dex. If you cast that, you cannot use inversion of spirit. I believe you can also not use talisman of Altuna, which also gives a hit point increase. But more importantly, you cannot stack your strength and your dex. So this is the big change I made, is swapping this out for that harnessing of Altuna. So these are the main buffs I put on my bar. I put Allure here. This is on every one of my hot bars. And this is kind of my emergency spell. So if I'm in a dungeon, in a dangerous spot, and I need to rebuff, I'm confident that I can, let's say I have a charm pet or something attacks me. This is my spell that I want to protect me and be able to actually use while I have my buff bar on. If a roamer comes up or if my charm breaks or something, this might be different for you, or maybe you don't need it at all. Maybe you're monk, you have fiend death or something, and you could throw another buff in here. Let's quickly, before I use the buffs, we're going to quickly just go over the buff sets. Sorry for the stumbling here a little bit. So if you click this icon, you have load spell set, save spell set, and delete spell set. So the way I do mine, and some of them I have to redo, as you start to play different characters, it's going to be important to have different buff sets for those different characters. So the way I organize these is I use the first letter of every class. So the WSEs, that's my warrior, shaman, enchanters. The WCEs are my more warrior, cleric, enchanter buffs. And typically I'll have a buff 1, a buff 2, buff 1 being what I use for my quick buff, buff 2 being for things that are more permanent or don't fit on my quick buff. I'll have a damage one. I do have a separate set now for Sky for this class, and a typical boss fighting set that have things. I'll remove things that I don't use on a boss fight, and add things that are beneficial on a boss fight. So let's just look at my. I don't want to save over it, so you got to be careful of that. But we're going to go to load, and then the way to save these, of course, if you do need to save one, you just go down to add new set. I'm just going to call this, temp 1. And then that is now saved. So we can see that right up here. I'm going to delete it. A way to delete it is just go down to the delete icon and select it, and then it's gone. I don't believe there's a way to rename these once they're created. You just have to re-add them. That's okay. Let's quickly go to my buff 2 set. And again, you can see Allure here is not rememming, right? It's still there because I have it on every one of my buff bars as my safe. Now, here we're going to see some Enchanter buffs as well, but really we're mostly looking at this middle line here, right? These are the other buffs. Inner Fire, all it's going to do is give you, I think, 2 more AC and 20 more health. That's why I have it on my second bar. I'm not that concerned if I miss it, but if I'm going through my rebuffs, might as well throw it on there anyway because it does stack with everything on that first bar. Chloroplast, Charisma, Rage. I put Rage here because as I'm not using this for quick, so as I'm going through these, Rage takes about 30 seconds to load, so I'm hoping that it loads before I get done with those buffs. I don't normally have both Alacrity and Swift like the Wind on here. I am playing an Enchanter, so normally I just use Swift like the Wind, of course, but the top level Shaman buff, get rid of these. The top level Shaman buff, of course, is Alacrity 4. And so that's the one you would typically be using unless you're playing an Enchanter or something that has a haste that is better than Alacrity. Okay, so we're going to swap back to our buff 1. Make sure that you don't, as you're coming over here, you don't slide down to the save spell set because it's very easy to overwrite your spells. It will give you a prompt before you do that, so don't always click yes because when you reload one, it doesn't ask you. Uh, this window, I don't normally have this like this. I find this to be a little bit of a pain. So if you go to display types, I like the memorization spell bar only, and I can just hide this wherever. You will notice if you do that while you're memming spells, it will kind of stop memming them. So you just have to click on it again to get the rest of them to load. But I just find that is, and a lot of times I'll just hide this somewhere. But it is nice, like if you're trying to mem a spell um, while you're in a fight. Let's say Swift wears off on a boss, and you're like, oh, I need to sit and mem it real quick. It's nice that that other big giant thing doesn't come up, and you just get this spell bar kind of showing you that it's close to being done. All right, so we went over the bandolier set, so now we're going to go over. Sorry, we didn't go over the bandolier set. So we went over, setting your buff bars, setting your buff sets. We went over what buffs stack, and so now what we're going to do is talk about bandolier sets. And why are we going to use bandolier sets? The reason is because I want to take advantage of this item right here with extended enhancement 3. So this will extend all of your long duration buffs by 15%. And I don't know about you, but I like my buffs to last as long as possible so I don't have to worry about them. So what I actually have set up is I have 2 bandoliers and then my quick buff. So I can click this button, this macro, and it auto swaps in my Rokyl's Channeling Crystal. This item is usable, as we can see, by Bard, Necro, Wiz, Mage, Enchanter. If you don't play one of those classes in your trio, maybe there's something else you can use for extended enhancement and you wouldn't need this. And then once I'm done with my quick buff, I will go ahead and click the Fangles macro, and then that's in there like that. So how do we set those up? So basically what you want to do is put in to your, and all that really matters, this is just for your ranged item and your primary and secondary. So put whatever items you want in here, and you can go up to, the EQL button, inventory, and then bandolier. And this is where you can see your current bandoliers, but you actually use a command in order to do this. So what you're going to type once you have things set up the way you want is /bandolier. And then I'm just going to do that so it shows us. I'm going to have to go over to my other window. So this is, what you need. You need to add, delete, activate, or set name. In this case, all we care about is add. So we're just going to do /bandolier add, and then we're just going to call this one temp. Like, call it something that you can remember what it is, and it's going to be used in your macro here in a second. So we can see I added that, and if I were to click on my Fangoal one to get my Fangoal in, and now I go ahead and activate this one, it's going to sometimes, and we're going to go over this in the macro, it takes 2 clicks to get something to go in. I don't know why. I don't know if that's a bug or if I'm doing something wrong, but I use a macro to get over that. So how do we set up the macros? We go into actions and then macros. And I'm not going to reset this up, but basically you would say new macro, you would give it a name. And then if we look at my Rokyl's macro, it's going to be /bandolier, activate, space, and then the name that you called that bandolier, right? And then you have to, of course, have a name, social name for the macro itself. Then you're going to do a pause 10. I found that was enough. So /pause space 10. And then another bandolier activate Rokyl. So the very same one as line 1. That gets rid of that problem that we saw where when I activated it once, it didn't work. And then I have the same thing for swapping my, let's go to the Fangles one. I have the same thing for this one, right? I've got a macro called Fangoal. You could just call this, weapon, but you'll have to recreate it anyway. I want to know exactly what it's going to swap in. Bandolier activate Fangoal /pause 10 /bandolier activate Fangoal. And what that ends up doing for me, as I showed before, and we'll actually go ahead and do the process. So like, let's say it's time for me to rebuff. All I'm going to do is get onto my buff 1 bar. I'm going to click Rokyl. I'm actually going to wait until I see the little like shield icon there. And then I'm going to hit quick buff. Those are done. I'm going to hit Fangoal. That's going to swap in, and I'm back into fighting stance without having to open up any inventory windows, find that item, swap it in, anything like that. Maybe some better ways to do it, but that is the way I do that. And so now you can see just with this first set of buffs, all right, I've got my 7,306, HP, got a decent amount of mana here, my endurance, and my 559 AC. I would then swap to, and these are my stats, 492, 389, 172, so you can see those. So I would then swap to my second one. These are going to load. Again, these top ones are for my Enchanter. You may have other buffs. Let's say you're playing a Druid. You're going to have to see, if there's a different, buff set that works with Druid. But I'm just going to go down the line here. I would not have switched out my Rokyls yet, so I'm just going to go down the line. Inner Fire, Chloroplast, Charisma. You can use, if you are playing Enchanter, Charisma is the Shaman buff. Adoring Grace is the Enchanter buff. They are the exact same stats. Adoring Grace does last longer, so I do normally use Adoring Grace, but for the purposes of this video, I put Charisma in here. Rage, as I talked about before, I leave that last, so as I'm buffing through these, Rage will be loaded. This is a permanent buff, so you don't always have to do this. But this does get removed by certain dots and things that NPCs cast right now. Again, the developer said they were going to take care of that. And again, I would do clarity here if I just had a Shaman and it was the best. But in this case, I now am also, going to take all the buffs that my Enchanter has. And that's why I try to keep them separate, because we saw the Shaman buffs will fill up a whole buff set, right? And so if I swap out my another trio, I don't have to build a whole new Shaman buff bar at level 50. I can use the same one. And then down here, if you don't have any buffs left, I just use these for things that I commonly do. So
Haste wore off you, maybe you should recast it.
that was my EQ companion saying that this haste wore off because I cast this one. That's kind of funny. So for instance, I do a lot of things with levitate. So I typically will cast that illusion, then remove it, and then that leaves the levitate buff. And then a lot of times I'm not going to cast these now because I think these guards will attack me. But I would typically have like a couple of illusions that I might use quite often. And then, I just, swap my Fangol back in, load spell buff, or load set, and then I just go right back to my damage. And a lot of times I will have, for example, for me personally, I'll have my haste on my damage bar because I might be charming a pet and have to go ahead and haste that pet out. Also have Boon of Garu on there a lot. But let me just check my notes real quick. I think, oh, real quick, just if you are playing an Enchanter with a Shaman, a couple of things. One other thing that doesn't stack, your Arch Shielding does not stack with the Shaman buff. So you will want to use the Shaman buffs over that Enchanter Shield. You lose the 20 magic resist from it, but you don't get your max health. And you can see now that I have Inner Fire, my health went up to 7326. You can see my strength over here is now, well over the cap at 543 from putting on rage, and AC went up just a little bit. So Inner Fire, if you're like, hey, I don't have an extra buff slot, to put that in, not a big deal. It's something that I never even bought until yesterday when I um, saw that Discord post, but now it's on my buff bar because every little bit, helps, when you're fighting these bosses. So I think that's it for today. Hopefully this was helpful. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe. I try to, I'm just new to creating this content for EverQuest Legends. I'm trying to go live 1 or 2 times a week and then trying to create these videos when I find something that may be useful for the community. So thank you. Have a nice day.